Hi everybody, it's Nikki, and I am here to attempt a really complicated video about calibration factor, Isig, and predicting your blood glucose based on those numbers. I have been doing days and days and days of kind of data collection and trying to figure out, first of all, what it all means, and second of all, how to use it, because it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to actually be able to use it. And I feel like I'm getting really close. And in fact, I'm getting so good with it, I use it all day, every day to kind of make some decisions about my own, care. But I have no idea how to explain this to anybody who might be silly enough to try to watch this video. So I did make myself a few notes to kind of go by, because if not, it's dizzying. Okay. These videos are my personal experience, not to be used as medical advice. I am sharing these things with you today because I'm trying to tighten my blood sugar control, and I know I'm not alone in that. And I think anything that we can share, who knows, maybe it will help. So here I am with my Isig and my calibration factor. First of all, your Isig is located, I'll show you these things really quickly. Your Isig is located under your status. I hate the reflection because I can't see anything at all. I don't know if you can either. Status, sensor, and then you just kind of scroll down until you see Isig. Okay, so my Isig is a 19.05. I didn't bring my blood sugar tester, so I can't actually take one all the way through, but I figure I'm going to make this video anyway, and I could give you guys examples until the day is done once I get my blood sugar tester. Okay, so your Isig, I can't tell you what it all means. I just understand that it has something to do with the measure of your glucose inside your blood. There's a little metal thing, and it measures down inside your blood. That's not technical, and it's probably wrong, but that's what it all means to me. I have been told about Isig and calibration factor by Medtronic through many phone calls over the 10 years, 9 years, whatever it's been, but they've never explained to me what the actual significance of it is, other than to say, did you check your Isig to check if a sensor gave me a bad reading, did you check your Isig? But I didn't know what it meant. And they would also say, you can use your calibration factor, but I didn't know what that meant. So at my mom's encouragement, I began to look, and now I'm like, mesmerized by the whole thing, and I'm sitting with my calculator every day. Generally speaking, I can use my calibration factor in about 1 million ways. There's probably 4, but it feels like 1 million, and it feels like every day I have a slightly different way to use it to kind of help me get some information. And it's kind of, to me, like Waze, like when you get to look ahead and see what directions are coming, not just where you are. It's like using your map coupled with the direction that's coming up next, coupled with the fact that you can go and look ahead, and you're kind of, adding all these things together and calculating everything. That was a really bad example, but that's what I'm doing with it, and that's what it feels like. I'm using all these things together to try to make these decisions. I can also use my calibration factor as a judge as to whether or not a meter finger stick or my sensor glucose, which is your SG, right? That's your sensor glucose. It's kind of like a gauge to see whether or not those are practical numbers. Again, it's an estimate, but it's an anchored estimate. So if I get something crazy on here, and I do a quick calculation, I might be able to, that doesn't make any sense. And at the very least, I might get up and go test. It also has a couple of times I've done a finger stick, and using my calibration factor, I've realized that something doesn't make sense about the finger stick. So before I give myself insulin for it or whatever it is, I go and I do a second finger stick, only not to my surprise to find that it was, 40 points off, 50 points off, whatever it was. So it's this good kind of built-in gauge that I have. I can also use it, and have used it, to identify a bad sensor before going through all of the stuff that you have to go through before you realize you have a bad sensor. I had 2 back-to-back days, maybe 3. There were 3 back-to-back bad sensors. and my calibration factor from the beginning let me know that it was bad. Now it took me a couple of hours or days to realize that that's what the information was, but once I realized it, you know, the next one I was like, oh yeah, this one's bad too. So it was a bad lot. But what else was I going to say? The simplest of them, this is going to be a long video, I apologize. If you're still with me, I'd say that the simplest use of your calibration, of my calibration factor, is as a ballpark blood glucose in the absence of a meter. So for instance, today, this is perfect. I do not have my meter. I did run out of the house without it, which was silly because it was what my whole video was about, but here I am. And it's a good opportunity for me to maybe show you how I could kind of give myself an estimate. Now I can't test it without my meter to confirm, but as soon as I get home, I'll try and I'll add it in. That's weak. I apologize. Okay. I believe in this thing. It's really pretty cool. And like I said, if nothing more, it's a good kind of estimate that you have that's anchored in your number, that you can kind of hold up against all these million other numbers that you're getting, just to see if you're kind of in the right place. Okay, in order to calculate my calibration factor, when I'm stable, this is the key. The time that you get your calibration factor is when you're stable, and that is because your calibration factor is on this scale, and as you rise, it rises, and as you begin to fall back to stable, or you know, as you fall back, you begin to stabilize, it gets closer to your main number again. As you begin to crash, it will go down, and again, as it stabilizes, it comes back up. My calibration factor is a 5.5. I am about 96% sure in that number. And first thing in the morning, assuming I'm not rising, I can calculate my calibration factor and I'll see a 5.5 or a 5.4 or 5.6, somewhere in there, 5.2 even, but a 5.2 might mean I'm beginning to go down a little bit. So in order to calculate my calibration factor, I needed to do a couple of days, and I really think, to be completely honest, I think it took me a couple of weeks to really pinpoint. Now, I didn't know what I was doing, and now I understand it better. And your blood glucose fluctuates in the morning too, so there's that. But you really are looking for this one number that seems to keep popping up when you're stable. And that is that you haven't eaten anything yet, or you haven't just gotten done exercising. You know, if you're in auto mode overnight, you're pretty steady in the morning, although I do rise sometimes, so I have to kind of take that into consideration. And then the way I would do it is I would take my blood glucose by a finger stick and I would divide by my Isig, and that's going to give me my calibration factor. What else was I going to say? Once this is established, I multiply my Isig times my calibration factor to get a ballpark BG. So I have determined that my calibration factor when I'm stable is a 5.5. So what that means to me is anytime I've walked out of the house without my blood sugar tester and I want to kind of have an idea as to whether or not this is a good number, I can go into my Isig. Again, I go through status, sensor, Isig, and 18.09. And then I will just show you really quick, because a minute ago I thought I was beginning to crash, and now I'm feeling less like I'm crashing. So I'm checking to see whether or not that 134 even makes sense. So I'd go 18.09 times 5.5, and it's going to give me a 99 whatever. Okay. Now that's ballpark. 134 is ballpark. And what I actually think is that I'm beginning to go a little low. So my guess is really if I were about a 4.5 times 1805, this, I shouldn't be doing this because this is risking the whole thing, an 81. My guess is I'm actually lower than that because, as I said, I feel like I'm beginning to crash. Now I'm getting crazy. Okay, what I know is that using my 5.5, I can get this ballpark. And a ballpark 99 and 134, I think those are pretty dang close. Now, would I treat based on it? Preferably not, or at least conservatively so. But as I said, in a pinch, when you don't have anything that you need, or you're just not sure and you don't know whether or not you need to go check, am I crashing right now? You know, it gives you, oh, this actually says 99, so maybe I should go check. I don't know if any of this makes any sense. I know that I'm doing all this work and I know that there's really good stuff and it's becoming intuitive for me how to use it. I just don't know how to communicate it. And I'm 10 minutes into an incredibly boring video. Somebody out there is watching it because somebody, you know, I don't know why they're watching it, but okay. There are times that it's not perfect, and neither is my blood glucose monitor, and neither is my sensor glucose, and all these other things, right? When I'm falling fast, when I'm rising fast, and my calibration factor really changes. So let's say I become a 3 or a 10, meaning I'm falling or I'm rising quickly. That's where that when you multiply by 5.5, obviously, it's not going to be the perfect number. It's still a great ballpark. How reliable is it? This is what I'd like to say. These are my couple of days. And when I say couple, I really mean like 2 weeks I've been doing stuff like this. And these are my numbers where I've been testing repeatedly throughout the day. One day, I think I maybe collected 35 different, estimates and then calculated those. And the next day, I think it was 45. And this is just 2 of the days I've done. And I found that between 68 and 85% over the 2 days of my runs, that's what I'm going to call them, all the collection, fell between 20% of the blood glucose that I got with my meter. Now, that is as accurate as a meter. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like our meters are about 20% right now. In fact, I've done a lot of reading on this too. FDA has just begun to change guidelines and they're working towards 15%, but lots of what we're using right now is still 20%. So that means that almost, let's say 70 to 85% fell within that 20%. That's pretty good. And what's even more important is what didn't fall inside that 20%. Some of them were like 1 point off or 2 points off. I mean, so I would like to say upwards of 90% were just an incredible ballpark number for if you don't have a meter. And I will complain and cry about my meters in another video. I am working my way to that. But it's this great anchor number. So I'm going to do this. This video is so long and I apologize. I would give you a couple of examples. When I had to mark no, I went back and calculated everything. And if it turned out it was within 20%, meaning it was a great number, I marked it as yes. And when it was not within 20%, I'd mark it as no. So some of my no's were, sorry, I have all, this is bad. Okay. Not yet, here we go. My estimated blood glucose was a 130. My actual blood glucose was a 164. So I had to mark it as a no because it was outside of 20%, but we're talking 164 and 130. My meters are like that. That's fine with me. It was not 164 and 264 or 364. I mean, it's still really close. That's one example. My actual blood glucose was a 149 in this example. My estimated blood glucose was a 184, which is outside of my 20%. But when I calculated what 20% was of 149, my scale was a 120 to a 178. So my scale, the top of it was a 178, and my estimate was a 184. Again, I mean, it's really, really close. Now, would I go and calculate an exact amount of insulin based on a 184? I wouldn't. But I can, with some confidence, say, you know what, my sugar is probably not all that high. Or, yeah, my sugar is probably, it's really climbing. It was 90 a couple minutes ago, whatever. I am so excited about this whole thing that I can barely contain myself, which explains how I didn't contain myself for 14 and a half minutes. So thank you for watching. Wake up. I'll be back. And I hope everybody's having a great night. Bye.